In this session, we will discuss about the frequency distribution. First of all, we will see about the numerical data. Normally, we are saying the numbers as the numerical data, and if you see about this numerical data, this can be divided into two parts. The first one is the ordered, that it means that this array of numbers can uh, rearrange in an ordered way. Then, or if it is arranged in an ordered manner, then we are saying such array as an ordered array of numbers. Therefore, here you can see, here we are just having the numbers without having any order, even the ascending order or descending order. But here you can see now the numbers have arranged in the ascending order. Therefore, since we have used an order here, either the ascending or descending, then we can say this as an ordered array of numbers. And if we are having an ordered array of numbers, then we can use the stem and leaf display as the method which we can present this data, or as the data presentation method. We can use this stem and leaf display, or we are saying stem and leaf diagram, for this ordered array. And the next thing is the frequency distributions and the cumulative distribution. Therefore, if you are having the numerical data, then we can set them as the frequency distributions or else as the cumulative distribution. Therefore, if you are having the frequency distributions or the cumulative distributions, then you can use the tables, you can use the histograms, you can use the polygons, and you can use the ogive curves to represent this type of data. Therefore, you can simply say ordered array can be shown using stem and leaf plot, and frequency distributions or the cumulative distributions can represent using tables, histograms, polygons, and the ogive curve. Therefore, first of all, we will see about this stem and leaf plot. Therefore, a stem and leaf plot is a special table where each data value is split into two parts. The first part is called stem and the latter part is called as the leaf. Therefore, we are normally using stem as the first digit or digits, and leaf as the last digit. Therefore, if you are having a number like this, now think about, if you are having 53, then you are saying that this 3 as the leaf, this would be the leaf, and 5 would be the stem. Therefore, you can see that last digit is the leaf and the first digit is the stem. And if you see about 275, if you see about 275, here this 5 would be the leaf. Always the last digit is taken as leaf, and here you can see that first two digits are taken as the stem. Therefore, if you remove the last digit, then the remaining part will be the stem of that number. Therefore, sticking to this concept of identifying stem and leaf, then we are writing the numbers in a table. We are calling such table as a stem and leaf plot. Even though we are saying it as a leaf plot, actually it is quite like a table. Okay, now, this is how we are creating a stem and leaf plot. First, this is the raw data format that we are having. It is saying raw data means the data as it is as the collected form. Therefore, now if you see about this set of data, now you can have several data points: 24, 26, 24, 21, then another 2, 27, 30, 41, 32, and 30. Therefore, if you need to construct a stem and leaf plot, what you have to do first is you have to rearrange the numbers. Normally, we are having numbers inside the stem and leaf plot. Therefore, first of all, we have to rearrange the numbers in the ascending order. If you rearrange the numbers in the ascending order, it means that you have to order the numbers from smallest to largest. Then you will get an array. This is said to be an ordered array of numbers. Therefore, the ordered array would be 21, 24, another 24. Since we have two 24s, then 26, 27, 27, 30, 32, 38, and 41. Therefore, The first step, what you have to do is you have to rearrange the data in the ordered manner. It is from smallest to largest. We are saying it as the ascending order. Then we have to divide these numbers, this ordered array numbers. If you consider this 21, this has to be divided into leaf and the stem. Therefore, if you consider the first number, the stem would be 2 and the leaf would be 1. Then if you go for the second number, it is 24, then leaf would be 4, stem would be 2. Therefore, you can still stick in this row. It is because still the stem is 2. Then you are separating the next number with comma, and then comma separated values will be used here. Then next value is 24. Therefore, now leaf is 4, stem is 2. No need to rewrite the system again and again. Therefore, we are only writing the leaf number only. Then the third value that we can see here is 24. Therefore, another 4 should be appeared in this uh, row which is having stem as 2. Therefore, now, if you see about this set of data, it is from 21 to 27. Therefore, we have now we have now common stem value. Common stem value is 2 for all this set of data. Stem value is 2, and therefore the leaf value should be 1, 4, 4, 6, 7, and 7. Then you have to write down those leaf values. You have to write down those leaf values in the stem and leaf plot for the stem 2. And since you have finished all the values having the stem 2, then we have to move for the next set of values. Here you can see the next set of values can be have 30, 32, and 38. Here you can see that now stem has changed to 3. Therefore, the value for stem is 3. Then you have to use a new row. Starting stem is 3, and then you can have the leaf value 0, 2, and 8. You have to write them using a using separate using a comma. Therefore, here you can have 3 with 0, 2, and 8, and then you are having another remaining number. It is 41. Since 4 is the stem of this 41, we will use a new row to insert this value 4 as the stem, and then leaf would be 1. Therefore, this is how we are creating stem and leaf plot for a given data set. Therefore, if you look back about the step that we have to use to create stem and leaf plot, first you have to arrange the numbers in the ordered manner and then identify the stem and leaf, then write them in the appropriate rows and columns. And if you got just obtain a stem and leaf plot, then you should be able to read the stem and leaf plot. Then if you consider this example, if you see about here stem, I have considered stem as 3 and this leaf is 2. Therefore, what you have to do is you have to combine these two numbers here. Stem is 3, leaf is 2, means 3 and 2. Therefore, we can say this as it is the value for 32. Therefore, this is how we are reading a value from the stem and leaf plot. Now we will focus on the next part. It is the ungrouped data distribution. Ungrouped data distribution is quite like a table, and this shows each of value of the variable together with the number of times it occurs. Okay, if you see about the previous part, here we just have, if you see about this, here we are just having ordered array. Now we are coming for this frequency distribution. In the ordered array, we do not see any frequency values. We can just see the numbers only. But if you come to this part, then we will have the numbers as well as the frequencies for each number. Therefore, if you look about this case, now we have to first pay our attention on the ungrouped data distribution. Actually, this ungrouped data distribution is quite like a table, and this shows the number in the first column, and in the second column, you can see the frequency. It means that how many times the number appears in the data set. Therefore, if you see about this data set 21, 23, 24, 24, 26, 27, 27, 28, 30, and 30. In this data set, you can see that 21 appears one time, 23 appears one time, but 24 appears for two times. Then 26 one time, 27 again two times, 28 one time, and 30. Now you can see value is for two times. Therefore, when you are going to create this ungrouped data distribution, you can have it using a continuous set of values. Therefore, here you can see the minimum value is 21 and the maximum value is 30. Normally, if here it is no need to just rearrange the data in the ordered manner. But anyhow, if you rearrange the data in the ordered manner, it would be really easy for you to construct this ungrouped data distribution. But there is no hard and fast rule saying that you have to rearrange this data in the ordered manner. Therefore, if you see about this ungrouped data distribution, you can see value is starting from 21 and it is going up to 30. And in here, I have just writing all the values from 21 to 30. We having with one step. This means that 21, 22, 23, 24. For each one step, we are having these values. And then in the next column, we can include the frequency for the observed value. Therefore, in this data set, if you see about this data set, you can see that 21 appears for one time. Then we can say frequency of 21 is 1. Then next value is 22. If you see about this data set, then you can see that there is no any value saying as 22. There is 21 and then 23. Then what we can do is we can say that value 22 is not appears in the data set. Therefore, the frequency of the value 22 is 0. Then next value is 20. Next value is 23. It appears for one time. Then frequency is again 1. Next value is 24. Now you can see that 24 appear for two times. Then you can say that frequency of 24 is 2. Then no 25 is there, then value is 0 for 25, then 26, 1 for 27, frequency is 2. Likewise, you can construct this ungrouped data distribution. Therefore, if you ask to obtain ungrouped data distribution, here you can have the value and the frequencies for ungrouped data distribution. Now we will focus on the group data distribution. Group data distribution is also a tabular arrangement. It means that here also we are representing the data using a table. And this is it is arrangement of data by classes together with the corresponding class frequencies is called a group data distribution. The difference between this previous one and this group data distribution is here we are having single values, but once you come to this group data distribution, you will have the classes of values. It means that sometimes you can see that it is from 20 to 24. Likewise, we can insert all these four values inside one class. Therefore, it is just like we are grouping several values together. Therefore, if you are grouping several values together as classes, then such data distribution is said to be a group data distribution. Group data distribution. Sometimes, rather than saying them as group data distribution, sometimes we are calling them as group frequency distributions as well as for this. Sometimes we are saying this as ungrouped frequency distribution. It is because we are using this frequency values to create this set, this distribution. Okay. Now see about this example. Here we can see that weight of 100 students in a given university is as follows. Now think that if you have obtained the weights of the students, and first of all, you may write them as the single values. Now as an example, think about in this, we have selected the sample of 100 students, and if you are writing this values, then how will be the solution? Here it may have 60. Then next person say me that it is 75. Another person say I am 61 kilograms. Then again 60 kilograms. Then another one say I am 72 kilograms. Then another one say I am 85 kilograms. Therefore, you may get 100 values. Sometimes there may be 100 different values, or else some values may be same. But if you use ungrouped frequency distribution, if you use the ungrouped frequency or ungrouped data distribution, you may start from 60, and if the maximum value is 85, you have to mention all the values. It means 60, then 61 would be there, 62 would be there, 63 would be there, 64. Likewise, you may have a set of values, and you have to continue the values up to 85. Therefore, if you are using an ungrouped distribution, you may get a very long or very lengthy table for this. And if you see about the previous example also, in the previous example also, you can see that for some numbers, you can see that in this table also, for some numbers, we are having the frequencies as zeros. Therefore, actually, we do not need to highlight those numbers. It is because we are not going to interest about these zero frequency values. Therefore, what you can do is to shorten this table, since this is a lengthy table, to make it as a shorter table, what you can do is you can group these set of values. As an example, we can take, okay, I'm taking these first three values in one group, then next three values in another group, then next three values in another group, then 30, 31, and 32 would be the another group. Therefore, likewise, you can create the groups, and here you have a 0 and 0. Hmm. Likewise, you can make the group. Therefore, such distribution is called to be a, or it is said to be a group data distribution. Therefore, here you can see, instead of just having a single number, here you can see now the numbers are, or the values are given as classes. Therefore, the weight in kilograms from 60 to 62, they have defined it as a one class. Then for the next class, they have considered 63 to 65. Then 66 to 68, they have considered as third class. Likewise, they have constructed the classes accordingly. In the latter part of this session, we will discuss about how we are defining the classes and how to allocate the numbers to these classes. Therefore, now you can see that here you are having classes and the associated frequencies for each class. Now you can see that from the weight 60 to 62, there were 5 students. 63 to 65 kilograms, there were 18 students. 66 to 68, there were 42 students. Likewise, you can have the frequencies for classes or frequencies for groups. Therefore, we are saying such distribution as a group frequency distribution or group data distribution. Okay, now we will see the terms associated with the group data distribution. First term is the class interval. Therefore, normally we are using these class intervals to create this group data distribution. Here you can see, if you see this set of values, you can see the classes are defined as the 60, 62, 63, 65, 66, 68, 69, 71, 72, and 74. Therefore, we are saying these values as the class interval. Then, if you see for the first class, first class interval is 60 to 62. The next class interval is 63 to 65. Then, third class interval is 66 to 60. Then the last class interval is 72 to 74. Likewise, you can have the class interval value. Then the next important term is this class limit. The n number in the class is the class limit. The n number of the class interval is said to be the class limit. It is quite like this. Now think about, sometimes a student may say that, okay, my weight is 62.3 kilograms. If a student may say my weight is 62.3 kilograms. But in this class, if you see about this class interval, now you can see that it is end up with 62, but this class is beginning from 63. But in between these two classes, there is a gap of 1. Therefore, To fulfill that gap, we are defining this important term called the class limits. Therefore, the nth number of this class would not be now 62. Therefore, we can go, here it is quite like this. Now think about this is the class you are having 60 to 62, and then you are starting from 63 and you are moving it up to 65. Therefore, what you can do is you can come here, you are having a gap. Therefore, now you are coming to the middle of this class. Therefore, we are saying this value is 62.5. I will tell you how we can define these values. Therefore, now this value can be said to be the class limit for this upper class limit for the first class, and here if you say the lower limit, it would be just the 59.5. 59.5 would be the next class. Therefore, if you can do the same thing for all the other classes. Therefore, if you identify the class limits, then it would be the last value or the maximum or the minimum value that you can see inside the class. Therefore, the n number in the class interval is said to be the class limit. But for some cases, there will not be some class limits. We are saying such classes having the open class intervals. It may that for some classes, there will not be any upper bound, or else sometimes it may not be having the lower bound for classes. As an example, if you are dealing with a data set having the age of person, then you may think that I can group all the people who are having the age or age greater than 74 as one classes. Therefore, you may say the last class would be 74 years and over. Therefore, here you can see only the lower limit only, or this lower class interval, but there is no any upper class interval. And when you are considering this a or this weight, then for the weight you may say that okay, I am taking all the observations below the 10 kilograms in one class. Therefore, you can say uh, 10 and below 10. It means that you are having the maximum as 10, and you can say have the below as below as any value which is less than 10. Therefore, in such situations, you may have either upper bound or the upper class interval or the lower class interval. Therefore, such situations are called as the open class interval. Then we will see about the class boundaries. Therefore, in practice, these class boundaries are obtained by adding these, adding these, adding the bound, adding the class upper limit and the lower limit. Therefore, this is how we are defining the class boundaries. Therefore, when you need to define the class boundaries, you are considering one class. Here, you may take that this is the first class boundary. If you need to obtain the first class boundaries, therefore, here this is the upper value for first class, this is the lower value for first class, for lower value for second class. Then you are adding these two values and divide them by 2 to obtain the class boundaries. I will discuss one example. Here I am just explaining these terms. Therefore, the upper limit or this upper class boundary of one class would be the same as the lower class boundary of the next class. Therefore, if you have obtained the class boundaries, then upper class boundary of one class would be equal to the lower class boundary of the next class. Then the next term is the size of a class or the width of a class. Therefore, we can simply say it is the difference between the lower and the upper boundary. The size of the class or the width of the class is said to be the difference between the lower and the upper boundaries. Okay. Now, this is the step that we need to construct a group data distribution. Uh, First step is you have to sort the data in ascending order. It is because we can easily identify the values once you are um, arrange them in the ascending order. That is why we are sorting the data in the ascending order. Then you have to find the range. we need to find the range to identify how many classes that we need. And then what you need to do is next you have to select the number of classes. Therefore, according to the data set that we are having, we are setting this class number. Therefore, normally we are having a class number having 5 to 15. As an example, now think about if you are having a minimum value as 5 and maximum value as 20. Therefore, how many classes you are going to define in here? You can start from 50 to 15. If you are defining 15 class, will it be a successful one? Definitely, it will not be a successful. It is because if you are having 15 classes, then you may have the values as 5 to 6, then 6 to 7, hmm, then 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10. Likewise, you may have the values as 19 to 12. Therefore, there is no point of defining the classes in this way. Therefore, what you can do is you have to identify the range first, and by seeing the range here, you can see that the range is now equal to 15. Maximum minus minimum is given the value as 15. Therefore, you can define the class number as 5. It is quite enough to have 5 classes if you are having the range as 50. Therefore, according to the situation, you have to define the classes. And now think about if the difference is now think about if you are having this range as 300. If you are having the range as 300, we are not going to stick into 5 classes. We can go to maximum of 15 classes. We can go to maximum of 15 classes. And if you need beyond that, definitely you can go it. But as a norm, normally we are practicing the classes from 5 to 50. And then you have to compute the class interval. It means that you have to compute the using the width. You can compute the class interval, and then you can determine the class boundaries. It is quite the limits is the this maximum value or the minimum value that a class can contain. Therefore, first you have to compute the class interval. You have to use the class width to compute class interval, and then you have to determine the class boundaries, or we have to determine these limits. And then this would be an added advantage point. It is because if you are computing the class midpoint, then it will be helpful for the further calculations. It is because after creating this group data distribution, sometimes we are going to draw the or graphical we are going to show them in a graphical manner, or sometimes we are considering the further analysis. Therefore, in such situations, we will need this class midpoints. Therefore, here I have included the computing is class midpoints would be an added advantage. And then the last point is the counting observation and assign it to the classes. Therefore, this is the these are the 7 steps that we have to follow if you need to obtain a group data distribution for a given set of data. Okay, now we will see one example for this. Now this example is the Alex has measured the length of leaves on the oak tree, and he has recorded the length to the nearest centimeter. And these are the values that Alex has obtained by measuring the length of the leaves. And here you can see the values that Alex has noted down. As soon as you see this value, you can see that there is no any defined order here. As the raw data, we can see this set of data. Therefore, if you need to arrange this data inside the group data distribution, what we need to do first is we have to rearrange this set of data. Therefore, here I have rearranged this data, and it means that I have sorted this data in the ascending order. Therefore, the values that I have obtained is I have obtained 3 ones, 2 fours, 3 fives, 1 6, 1 7, 1 3 8. Likewise, I have obtained the sorted data set for this raw data. Now you can compare these two data sets. Now you can see easily in the initial data set, you cannot even identify what is the minimum, what is the maximum. As soon as you see this data set, you cannot say what is the minimum and what is the maximum. Therefore, but once you see about the sorted data set, you can see that the minimum is 1 and maximum is 18. Therefore, this is one advantage of sorting the data. Then what we have to do next you have to identify the range for this set of data. Normally, we are obtaining the range as the maximum, taking the difference between the maximum and the minimum data point. According to this data set, you can see that 18 is the maximum value you are having, 1 is the minimum value you are having. Therefore, we can say that the range is the value is 18 minus 1, which is equal to 17. Since we are having the range as 17, we do not need to go for a higher number of classes. Therefore, we can define the number of classes as 5. We can define this number of classes as 5. Then what we need to do is we have to compute the class width. We have to compute the class width. To compute the class width, what we can do is you can use this equation. The equation is we have to divide the range by the number of classes. According to this example, we can see that we have obtained the range as 17 and the number of classes according to this example, we have defined it as 5. Therefore, once we take the ratio between this range and the number of classes, we can get a value as 3.4. Since we have obtained a decimal value, always we have to uh, approximate this value in the round up manner. Therefore, always you have to round off this value into the round up manner. Therefore, even though you are getting 3.1, the rounded value would be 4. It is because since it is greater than 3, the next whole number, appropriate whole number would be 4. It is because it says that the class width must be at least 3.4 units. At least 3.4 units means this is the minimum value that we can have for the class width. Therefore, we have to define the class width as value 4. Always we are rounding up this value. Now we are having the minimum value, maximum value, and the class width. Therefore, now we can define the class interval. First of all, we are defining the class interval. Therefore, when we are going to define the class interval, we can start it from the minimum value we are having for our data set. Here you can see that according to our data set, minimum value was 1. Therefore, here you can see the minimum value was 1, then you can have the class width as 4 to identify the class interval. To identify the class interval or the class interval, we are using the value 4. Now, what would be the upper value for this class interval? Here you can see that altogether the class width should be 4. It means that you can have the values from 1 to 4 units from 1. Therefore, you can have 1, then next value would be 2, next value would be 3, and next value would be 4. Therefore, now you can see that the class width is now equal to 4. Therefore, here you are defining this value as 4. Normally, one thing I have to tell you, going back to previous slide for an important point. Now, I told you that when we are calculating the width of a class, we are taking the difference between the lower and the upper class boundaries. If you need, you can take this class intervals also. If you are taking the class interval, always this width should be the difference of the class interval plus 1. Difference of the class interval plus 1 would be the width of the class. Normally, we are not going to use that formula. Normally, we are using the difference between the lower and the upper boundaries as the width of the class. But if you still having the values for class intervals only, then for such situation, what you can do is you can just take the difference between the upper class interval and the lower class interval, and then to that obtained value, you have to add 1. That is how you are obtaining the class interval. Therefore, if you come back to this example, you can see that the value is 1 here, and the defined value is 4 here. And if you take the difference again, 4 minus 1, which equals to 3. Therefore, now you can say that class width is 3 plus 1, it would be now equal to 4. Or else you can, without much more worrying regarding these things, you can simply say, since it is starting from 1, then there should be 4 units. It means since you have identified class with as 4, then you may have the values 1, 2, 3, and 4 inside this first class interval. Then you can start the next class interval from value 5. Then the ending value of this class interval would be, now you are starting from 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you are having 4 units, therefore you can end the class interval as 8. Therefore, next class starting from 9, then end up with 12. Next one, 13 to 16, 17 to 20. Okay, now I have started this class interval from the minimum value I am having. Now you can see that in the last class, the maximum value is already included. It is because now we can see that in this data set, the maximum was 18. Now we can see that for the final class, according to this set of data, you can see that the final class we have obtained was 17 to 20. Definitely, you can see that number 18 is appeared in this class. Now you can see that this is the class interval you have obtained. Now you have to define the class boundaries. Now you have defined the class boundaries. To define the class boundaries, we are not starting from this lower class interval of the first class. Therefore, always we are starting from the upper class interval of the first class, and we are combining it with the lower class interval of the next class. Therefore, once you use these two classes, what you can do is you can add these two values together and divide this by 2 to obtain the class bound. Therefore, now you can see the value is 4.5. Therefore, the upper class boundary of the first class is now equal to 4.5. Then this would be same to the lower class boundary of the next class. Now you can see that it is equal to 4.5. Then we can use these two values to obtain the class boundary. Then 8 and 9 will be selected. Therefore, what we can do is 8 plus 9 added together and divided by 2. Therefore, you can see that value is 8.5. Then you can say that the class boundary for this point is 8.5, and it would be same as the lower class boundary of the next class. Now, if you see for this class, the class boundaries are 4.5 to 8.5. If you take the difference between these class boundaries, it should be definitely equal to the class width. We have defined the class width as 4. Now you can see the difference between the class boundaries are equal to 4. Therefore, our calculation is totally correct. Then using the next two values, 12 and 13, you can obtain the values as 12.5. Here it is again 12 point. Then you have to use the next set of values. In the next set of values, it is 16 and 17. Then you will get this as 16.5. Here also 16.5. But so far we have not identified any values for the lower class boundary of the first class and the upper class boundary of the last class. What you have to do here is to obtain the lower class boundary of the first class. You have to subtract this class width from this upper class boundary. Here we can do this calculation. 4.5, it is the upper class boundary, minus the width would be equal to 0.5. Therefore, you can say that the class boundary is now equal to lower class boundary is 0.5. And here you can say the upper class. This is how you are obtaining lower class boundary. It is upper class boundary of the first class minus the class width. To obtain the upper class boundary of the last class, what you can do is you can add the class width to this lower class boundary of the last class. It is how we are defining the upper class boundary. It is 16.5 plus 4 gives you the upper class bound value. Here you can see that value is now equal to 20.5. The value is 20.5. Now, this is how you are obtaining the class boundaries. And if you see for these class boundaries, now you can see all the class widths are equal to 4. Difference is 4 in between these two. For these two also difference is 4. And this is how you are defining the class bound. And these are the class boundaries that you have obtained. And if you need to calculate the class midpoint, actually this is an additional part for uh, making this group data distribution, but actually we need class interval, class boundaries, and the frequencies only. But anyhow, I am discussing about this part, class midpoint. To obtain the class midpoint, the easiest way is add these two class boundaries and divide it by 2. Add the class boundaries together and divide it by 2. Or else if you add the class intervals together and divide it by 2, you will get the same result. Therefore, I am using these class boundaries to obtain class midpoint. Therefore, 0.5 plus 4.5, value is 5 divided by 2 gives you the first class midpoint. Therefore, the class midpoints obtained was 2.5, 6.5, 10.5, 14.5, and 18.5. If I again explain about how to get this midpoint is, you have to add these two values and divide this by 2. Here, to get this 6.5, add this 4.5 with 8.5 and then divide it by 2. It is how you are obtaining the class midpoint. And now we have come to the end of the creating of this group data distribution. Here, we can now include the frequency values in this group data distribution. Therefore, you can just count the values and then you can insert them, or else you can use the tallying technique to include these values. It is quite like this. Now you can see that for the class intervals, values from 1 to 4 will be here. Or else we can have a very good idea about the first class boundary. The values from these are the actual values that we can include in this class. For this first class, it is the values from 0.5 to 4.5. We can include in the first class. Therefore, if you see about the initial data set, we can include these values in the first class. Therefore, if you see about this set of values, you can see that it is from 1 to 0.5 to 4.5. These are the values. The number of values you can see here is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That is why we can see that the frequency 5 in the first class. This frequency 5 in the first class. Now, the second class is from 4.5 to 8.5. To go back to the original data set, 4.5 to 8.5. Therefore, what we can see is 5 should be definitely included here. Then these values should be included here and this 8 should be included. It is because the maximum is 8.5. Now, if you take the count for this, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 values. Therefore, now you can apply them inside this value. You can inside this table. Now you have obtained value as 8. That is how we are getting the value 8 here. Therefore, you can do the same thing for the other 3 classes, and this is how we are creating this group data distribution. And once we are having the group data distribution, normally we can calculate the relative frequency distribution and the percentage distribution for a group data distribution. If you are going to identify the relative frequency, what you can do is you have to divide the frequency by the total number of values. Now, for as an example, this is the class interval we are having, and this is the frequency distribution that we have obtained at the previous stage. These are the two columns I have considered. Class interval and the frequency column was taken for these first two columns. Therefore, now you can see that the total of these frequencies are equals now 38. Therefore, once you divide the frequency for a given class, once you divide frequency of a given class by the total value, then you can easily obtain the relative frequency. Therefore, if you consider the first class, then relative frequency is equal to 5 divided by 38. If you get the relative frequency for second class, you can get it as 8 divided by 38. For the third class, relative frequency would be 11 divided by 38. Likewise, you can obtain the other values uh, for the remaining classes. Therefore, you can keep the relative frequency as a fraction. No need to solve it into a decimal value. And now we will see how we can obtain the percentage distribution. Here we just need to calculate the percentage value. If you are having the relative frequency, just multiply that value by 100%. Just multiply that value by 100% to convert it into a percentage value. If not, what you can do is, again you have to divide the frequency by the total number and then multiply it with the 100% to obtain the percentage value. Therefore, you can do the calculation for this, and you can convert and you can write it as a decimal value. As an example, here what we need to do is, here we need to have the 5 divided by 38. You have to multiply it by 100% means you will get the value as here, rather than just writing it like this. It could be better if we can include the value. The value is 13.16. Therefore, you can say that it is the percentage value is 13.16. Therefore, when you are dealing with these percentages, therefore at the end, the total value of this percentage should be equal to 100%. It cannot be exceed the 100%. It cannot exceed the 100%. Therefore, you can check whether the calculations are wrong, or right or wrong using that technique. Okay, now we will discuss about how to obtain the cumulative frequency distribution. Uh, Here, the first two columns are for the group data distribution that we have already obtained. 1 to 4, 5, the frequency was 5, 5 to 8, frequency was 8. Likewise, I have included all the 38 data points in this group data distribution. And for this data distribution, now we can create this cumulative frequency distribution. When we are constructing the cumulative frequency distributions, you can construct it as the less than cumulative frequency or else more than cumulative frequency. You do not need to add both columns in the cumulative frequency, at the both columns at the same time in the cumulative frequency distribution. You can either use this less than cumulative frequency or the more than cumulative frequency. Normally, we are dealing with the less than cumulative frequency when we are going for the calculation. Therefore, now we will see how we can obtain this less than frequency, this less than cumulative frequency. To obtain the less than cumulative frequency, first of all, we need the frequency value. First of all, we need the frequency value. The first value of this less than cumulative frequency would be the first value that you can see as the frequency. Then this 5 is added to value 8. It is the value in the second row, and then this gives the sum for the next cumulative frequency value. The value is 30. Therefore, now you can see the cumulative frequency for second row is 30. Then 13 is added to 11. That is how we are obtaining value 24. Then 24 added to 9, we can obtain value as 33. Then 33 added to 5, then you can get this value as 30. And you can see that once you obtain the less than cumulative frequency values, now the value which you can see in the last row should be equal to the total value in the data set. This is how we are obtaining this less than frequency, less than cumulative frequency. If you see about the interpretation of this less than cumulative frequency, this less than cumulative frequency is combined with the upper class interval. Always this less than cumulative frequency is uh, interpreted using this upper class interval. Therefore, this 5 says that there are 5 data points which are less than or equal to 4. There are 5 data points which are less than or equal to 4. And this 13 is said to be there are 13 data points which are less than or equal to 8. It means that it is coming from 1 to 8. Therefore, this 13 says that, or if we interpret this 13, then we can say this 13 as there are 13 data points which are less than or equal to 8. Next one is 24. If we are interpreting this value, we can say there are 24 data points or there are 24 observations which are less than or equal to 12. Then this 38 says that there are there are 38 data there are 38 observations which are less than or equal to 20. Therefore, this is how we are interpreting this less than cumulative frequency. Now we will see how we can construct this more than cumulative frequency. If we are constructing the more than cumulative frequency, we can easily do it once we start it from the bottom of this column. Therefore, I am starting it from here. Then the last value directly comes as the value at this point. Then this 5 has to be added to 9. 5 plus 9 gives this value 14. Then this 14 added to 11, then this value gives us 25. This value gives us 25. Then this 25 added to 8, we can say that value is 33. Then 33 added to 5, we can see that you can get the value as 30. If you are using this more than cumulative frequencies, then the value which appears in the first row should be equal to the total number of observations. If you have correctly do the calculation, you will get this number which is equal to the total number of observations. Now we'll see what is denoted by what is saying by this more than cumulative frequency. When you are going to interpret this more than cumulative frequencies, generally we are using the lower class interval for a group data distribution. Normally we are using lower class interval. This 38 says that there are 38 observations which are greater than or equal to 1. There are 38 observations which are greater than or equal to 1. This more than. Then this 33 is there are 33 observations which are greater than or equal to or which are more than or equal to 5. Then this 25 says that there are 25 observations which are greater than or equal to 9. Then this 5 says that there are 5 data points which are greater than or equal to 70. Therefore, this is how we are obtaining the cumulative frequency distribution and interpreting the values in a cumulative frequency distribution. Okay. Now we will discuss about the next part. It is to obtaining the histogram. If you are dealing with the group data distributions or normally with the frequency distributions, then we are using the histograms to show those data in a graphical manner. Therefore, histogram, you can say histogram is a plot and which deals with the frequency distribution, and using the histogram, we can identify the underlying shape of a set of continuous data. It is quite like this. Now think about this is the frequency distribution you are having. If you just need to identify the shape of this data set, then you can use a histogram to fulfill that need. Therefore, histogram is quite like it is a plot, a data representation method, and this is associated for the frequency distributions. Normally, we are using the group frequency distribution. We are using the histograms to graphically denote the group data distribution. And this allows the inspection of the data for its underlying distribution. This is what I have mentioned previously also. And once you are using a histogram, then in the other way around, if you are having the data set, you can easily obtain the histogram. Or if you just have the histogram, you can just have an idea regarding underlying frequency distribution. Okay, now this is the histogram that we have I have made for the set of data that we have considered for the last example. And before obtaining this, I will discuss some important points of this histogram. This is quite like a bar diagram. As soon as you see this, this is quite like a bar diagram. But actually, this is different from bar diagram. It is because there is no any gaps between the bars. There is no any gaps between the bars. And in the y-axis of the histogram, always we are using the frequency values. Always we are using the frequency values for the y-axis of this histogram, and for the x-axis to write the values or to show the values in the x-axis, we are always using the class midpoint. That is why I told you when we are creating the group data distribution, obtaining class midpoints would be an added advantage. Therefore, now you can see that when you are going to construct the histogram, the class midpoints will be helpful. Therefore, this is one example I have taken. Therefore, now you can see that in this example, the class midpoints were 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. It is not the same example here what I have taken. But this is one example, one another example for histogram. Then what you can do is the according to that data set, I have identified the class midpoints as 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And always you are using the class boundaries to construct the histogram. Always we are using the class boundaries to construct the histogram. Therefore, by connecting these class boundaries and their frequencies associated for such classes, then you can easily construct the histogram. Okay, now we will try to create a histogram for this set of data. Since we will consider uh, this is the uh, this is the data set that we are having. Therefore, now we'll see what we can do with this data set. Therefore, if you need to construct histogram, first the y-axis should be always the frequency. Y-axis is the for the frequency, and for the x-axis, we will have the length of the leaves. Here it is the length we have considered. And if you see about this data set, now you can see that class midpoints are marked as 2.5. Then next point is 6.5. Then next one is 10.5. Next value is 14.5. And the last value is 18.5. This is how we have identified the value. Now what we are going to do is, now we need to mark the class boundaries as well. It is because we are using the class boundaries to uh, identify the width of these bars. Therefore, the class associated with this midpoint 2.5, we are having class boundaries as 0.5 to 4.5. Then next boundary starts from 4.5 to 8.5. Likewise, definitely in the middle of these parts would be the class boundary. Now you have to mark the y-axis with the appropriate values. Here we can mark them in this way. I am having minimum max 5 and maximum max 11. Therefore, I can mark them as 5, 10, and 15. This is how I am marking this. But if you need for a better view, you can just have the values with 2, 4, 6, 8. It is quite like the step of 2. Then I can construct the bars according to this height. For a class associated with midpoint 2, frequency is 5. Therefore, here we can say we are having a bar with value 5. Then next value is 8. Therefore, we have to go this up to 8. We have to go this up to 8, and it is somewhat like this. Then next value is for 8, 11. It is quite like this. Then the next value is 9. It is greater than 8, not less than 10. So you will get graph like this. Then the final value, it is again equal to 5. So we can have the graph in this way. Now you can see that there is no any gaps between the bars, and all these bars have marked using the class boundaries, and x-axis is now marked or named using the class midpoint. This is how we are constructing a mm, histogram for a given data set. Now we will move for the next part. It is the construction of the frequency polygon. Frequency polygon is also a graphical technique which understanding the shape of a distribution. Then this serve the same purpose as the histogram, but are especially helpful for comparing sets of data. Okay, if you see about this histogram, you can just have an idea for one set of data. But if there is another set of data, it is not easy to show them in the same histogram. Therefore, in such situations, if you need to see or compare two data sets, then the easiest way is using the frequency polygon. When we are going to construct the frequency polygon is quite like this, and here also we are using the class midpoints to construct the frequency polygon. Therefore, if we are constructing the frequency polygon, the important thing is always we are using the class midpoints to construct the frequency polygon, and then we are marking the we are marking the frequency of each class versus this class midpoint, and then we are connecting them using lines. We are not going to connect them we are not going to connect them using this type of bars. We are just using the points, and these points will be connected using the line. Now think about this example. If you consider about this example, now you can see that these are the class midpoints that we have obtained. And if you see about, if you need to construct the frequency polygon for this set of data, what we can do is we can use this set of data. Now we have identified the class midpoints, and this, no need to mark the class boundaries now. No need to deal with class boundaries. I just need the class midpoints only. And then I have to mark the frequencies associated for each class midpoint. Now, the class frequencies associated is here, value is 5, then the next value is 18, next value is 8, then third value is 11, somewhat here, then next value is 9, it's right here, then last value is 5, last value is 5. Okay, once you mark these points, then you can connect them together. You can connect them together. Therefore, this is not freehand sketching. You can use the ruler to connect them. Then you will get the values in this way. This is the frequency polygon. But we have not still finished this frequency polygon. Once you are constructing a frequency polygon, it should be exactly start from the x-axis and it should be also end with the x-axis also. Therefore, what we can do is we can mark one uh, we can mark another class midpoint in the upward direction and one class midpoint in the downward direction. Therefore, since we can see that difference between any two class midpoints are equal to 4, here we are having next class midpoint as 22.5. But here uh, we are going to this negative side. Since we are going to negative side, if it is possible, we have to definitely get a amount from this side also, but with this situation we can just connect them with the zero. It is because we are not defining the length for the negative direction, but normally the thing what we are going to do is we are adding one class width to this midpoint and we are subtracting one class width from the initial class midpoint. Therefore, by then you can connect them to this, then you can connect them with the x-axis. Therefore, once you connect them, then you will get it in this way. This point has to be connected with here and this has to be connected with here. For this example, we are connecting it with 0. It is because length cannot go beyond 0. It is the only reason. Otherwise, you have to come up with the appropriate class interval. Therefore, this is how we are constructing the frequency polygon. Therefore, now if you see about, if I again draw the histogram which is associated with this set of data, then you will get the histogram as well in this. You can get the histogram in this way. If I draw the histogram, it will be quite like this. This was the histogram that we have made here. This is the histogram that we have made for this example previously. Therefore, now you can see it is quite like the shape of the histogram that we have made already, and it is, simply you can see that the midpoint of the each rectangle, the midpoint of each rectangle is connected to obtain this frequency polygon. Okay, this is one example. You can construct this frequency polygon for this set of data also. And here, one important thing is we are using the class midpoint. Now we will look about the cumulative frequency table, frequency polygon. To obtain the cumulative frequency polygon, first of all, we need to identify the cumulative frequencies. But in this data set, according to this data set, the values were given and they have directly given us the cumulative frequencies. If the cumulative frequencies are not given, then what you can do is first of all you can identify the frequencies and then uh, with the things that we have discussed previous uh, minutes, then we can have this cumulative frequency. And if you need, you can have the percentage value for this cumulative frequencies also. Okay. Therefore, you can use the cumulative frequency and this we can say this as the cumulative frequency polygon, and this cumulative frequency polygon is meant to be the ogive curve. Therefore, if we are going to construct the ogive curve, here also we are denoting the cumulative frequency. So far in the histogram and the frequency polygon, we just deal with the frequency values. But when you are going to construct the ogive curve, or another name for ogive curve is the cumulative frequency polygon, then to construct this, we are using the cumulative frequency on the y-axis and we are using the class boundaries along the x-axis. And It is quite similar to histogram, and here instead of rectangles, here also we are using the lines only. And when we need to construct the cumulative frequency polygon, normally we are using the uh, more less than cumulative frequencies. Normally we are using this less than cumulative frequencies, and it will be associated with the upper class boundaries. Here in this example you can see that these are the class boundaries you are using. It is not the midpoints. Normally we are using the class boundaries to construct the Ogive curves. Therefore, if you are using less than cumulative frequency, if you are using the less than cumulative frequency, then your x-axis should be the upper class boundary. Your x-axis should be named with upper class bound. Therefore, this is what you have to keep in your mind when you are going to construct the Ogive curve. Therefore, as an example, if you see the data set that we have deal with, if you go back to the data set, it is the data set that we are having here. Now, if I construct this, I will write it here. Here in the y-axis, we will have the cumulative frequencies. In the x-axis, we will have the class boundaries. Here I am using the upper class boundaries. Therefore, for the first upper class boundary was 4.5. 4.5 was the first class boundary. Then next class boundary was 8.5. Then next one was 12.5. Then 16.5. And the last class was 20.5. Now you have to mark this less than cumulative frequency along with these upper class boundaries. Therefore, you can have the values in this way. I will use another color. 4.5, the value was 5. Then for 8.5, value was 13. Then next one 24. Then 33, and then value was 33. And once you mark these, you have to connect them in a freehand way. It is quite like a curve. It is not a polygon. Therefore, you are not using line. You are using the freehand sketching to join or to connecting these points. And then here you are having the upper class boundary. And for the very first, you have to draw the lower class boundary also here, and the lower class boundary says that value is equal to 0. Therefore, now you can use the freehand sketching to draw this. Therefore, once you draw it, you will get a graph in this way. It is quite like a graph in this way. It is a freehand drawing. You are not using. It should go through these points. It should. Normally, the shape of the cumulative frequency polygon, it is quite like this. Here in the example, you can see the cumulative frequency polygon is, it is quite freehand. For now, you can have it like this. Starting from here, it is going in this. We are not using lines, it is by using the freehand sketch. Therefore, the difference between the previous ones and this Ogive curve is Ogive curve uses the cumulative frequencies, and for the x-axis, it uses the upper class boundaries, not the class midpoint. And thank you all for joining with this session.